with my favorite guests on Wednesday. We've got Dave Snell, Jason Jurardo. If you've been here on Wednesdays, you already know them. If you haven't, you've got a really quality time ahead of you to get to know them. And the show is always about bringing value to the audience, to the future audience that may see this when the show is already completed, and to ourselves. So if we can win, 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 I think that's a great endeavor for at least an hour of today. We depend on chat to direct us. Love to answer your questions, address your concerns, give you some quality takeaways that you can actually put to work, and have a real positive time. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Dave. The word of the day is reinvention. We were briefly just discussing that. Love to hear what everybody's thoughts or activities are in that regard. So, Dave, great to have you back.
That's great to be back as always. Great to see you and Jason. Great word, great discussion I think we'll have today because, in my opinion, we're always reinventing ourselves. Who are we today is not the same as we were yesterday. Definitely not who we were at the beginning of our careers when we were children. Our goals, our ideals, our perspectives, our inputs have changed over time, and therefore we need to change over time to adapt. So as the environment externally affects us, our personality, our emotions change us internally, and we have to adapt. And that is the, in my opinion, part of the definition of reinvention is making sure that we're adapting to the environment to succeed.
Yeah, well, I think that's fundamental and very important. So, Jason, what's your take initially on reinvention and anything you want to bring everybody up to date with?
Well, good morning, everyone. Hopefully, I have a little issue with my internet this morning, so hopefully everything works out well. And I'd like to reinvent my internet for sure. I'm going to take it from a different standpoint, and we're going to see where the conversation takes us today and what the community has to say. But one of the things that I talk about, and it's my biggest belief, is that we are whole, perfect, complete as we are. We have everything inside of us already. And just like Michelangelo took the big block of, I believe, marble and made David, what did he say? He said, I chipped away everything that wasn't David. That's all he did. And I think that's kind of what we are, is that we put up these things that get in our way of being our true, authentic self. And so as we reinvent, we're actually not becoming something new in the sense that we're becoming our true self and cutting away what's getting in the way from that. So that I'll leave it with that this morning. It's great to be here. Great to see you all. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight because, it's all about the projection that you have going out, but also internally what you really feel you are or should be, and then being able to measure against that in a positive way. Too many people measure against other people, and it's not a fair playing field at that point. Someone has a bigger car, someone has a nicer house, someone plays better tennis, whatever it is, there's always going to be someone better. And the key is not to compete, but to really be your own best friend for who you are. Yesterday, our discussion was mental health, and we really got into what's normal. And the normal is better defined as what's normal for you. Right? If, hey, I'm always going to be a slow eater, that's normal. Compare yourself against someone who eats 62 hot dogs in 4 minutes and see how you compete. And I think people have to have blinders, in some ways tunnel vision, not to get distracted. When you're driving down the road, what are you looking at? Usually the car in front of you and staying within the lane. You start wandering off into billboards and into interesting things, you're going to get yourself in some type of trouble in time. And the other element, I think, with reinvention is enjoying the ride, enjoying the process. Most people are miserable until they're happy, and then they go right back to miserable the next day. right? Hit my goal. Okay, what's the next goal? Instead of really enjoying where you're at, taking time to reflect, review, maybe taking a time to get people to catch up or to help them versus singularly, climbing that mountain. I know Jason has said in the past, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with others. One has to ask themselves, where's the fire? Where's the rush? Why am I always waiting to go to the next place? And when I get there, I don't want that. I want something different. And most times you can come full circle to just where you were and save all the time and energy. So with that in mind, we've got Carrie here who always starts us off with a joke. The cheese used a Kleenex when blowing its nose. Now we have to be careful that debris didn't go any everywhere. But brie is the cheese. So Dave, what if, the longer you live, the more experiences you have, the more context you start to achieve. Right? You go from here's an action, but what does it all mean? And then after a while, meaning starts coming into play. So, in your journey of reinvention, what were the key elements that really made a difference?
It's a very tough one to answer, quite honestly. Let me step back 2 steps first. Go back to what you were just saying there. I wrote down a couple of notes here. And your point of people will always be happy, but then the next day they'll be miserable because they've achieved this goal. And it made me think of a discussion I had 4 or 5 years ago when I said, hey, I'll be happy when I go do this. I'll be happy when I achieve this goal. Well, then what's the next goal? I'm looking for external validation for my happiness. When the happiness comes from inside, to Jason's point, it's all inside us. It's where are we chipping away to find where it really makes us final, that piece, that the David that's perfect in somebody's eyes. And it reminds me that comparison is the greatest thief of joy. Well, Carl, you always go back down to, he has this nice car, they have this nice house, they have this. Well, I don't have that, and at the same time, their level or definition of happiness is different from yours. So don't compare yourself because the model of David may be absolute crap to somebody, pardon my term, but it's the most beautiful structure to an artist who sees something that you don't. So don't look for happiness externally. It's an internal thing. And then I'm trying to tie this into reinvention of, we don't know what happiness is or what that final David's going to look like for ourselves until we start to chip away at different pieces. And I'm really trying to build on your point there, Jason, because it really struck a chord with me, and it was very deep and impactful. Because as Michelangelo went along, he didn't say, boom, this is it. He had to keep finding that refinement to say, okay, where is it? And as we go through these processes, we're never going to find perfection. Again, somebody may look at Michelangelo and think it's crap. But in Michelangelo's eyes and others, it's become perfect. Well, what if I were to go up to what's left of David and say, I think he needs a scar here. That would be beautiful to me because it's human. It's not perfection. Everybody would be against me. Some people would be like, oh, that's real. It's very tough to determine what is the happiness that we get from this reformative processes we go through.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. And I think what it points out, are you unhappy until you can reach happiness for a moment? Or are you always happy and know there's opportunities to be happier? So, what is your base? If you did a business plan, you'd always have bad, average, and good projections, right? Worst case, normal case, best case. Well, your worst case should be, I'm glad to be alive and grateful for everything that's come into my life. and that I have to look forward to. When you get there, if you get there, and there's so many pivots along the way that nothing goes in a straight line. People come into your life changes beyond your control or choice, and now you're out there putting out a fire or doing something else. So I think gratitude is important. Plus, how you feel is how you make other people feel, right? If you're in a family and all of a sudden you're miserable and unhappy and disappointed, the person with you has no choice but to sink down with you to a point, right? Because either they feel sympathy and they feel sorry for you, or your behavior starting to negatively impact their chance at happiness, you know? And I think sometimes you got to realize it's not about you. It's about you and who you're involved with or what you're involved with and what role do you have, what responsibility do you take and accountability, because so many people do terrible impulsive things without thinking of the impact on others. If anything, they think they're doing others a favor because you're just such a weight on them or a challenge that and you know that's not true. And I think people delude themselves into thinking something that can justify what they know really isn't justifiable. And at a certain point, when you get honest with yourself, it comes to into your vision. But that's really an epiphany or a revelation, and you learn from it. The other big aspect before moving to Jason is understanding that, you know, you're only human. You're capable of making mistakes. You're capable of disappointing a lot of people. But that's normal. And if you can qualify anything as being normal. And you know, the nice thing is every day starts the next or the first day of your life. And if you can put the past behind you, which it is, and look forward to the future, that's going to be a positive impact on your ability to reinvent. So, Jason, I know you work with a lot of people who are naturally going through transitions and trying to reinvent themselves. What's your best approach in a situation like that?
I think to speak to that question and what we've been talking about, I wanted to mention the question you asked Dave is that what's needed, and I think what's needed within clients is trust. To trust ourselves as we go through this reinvention, as we go through this trend, as we change. And I think the key is you have to trust yourself and know that you're going to end up where you're supposed to be. And once you start with that, once you have that firm base, that firm center, it allows you to make so many different decisions that you wouldn't have made before. So helping them shake off all the stuff that's keeping them from having that trust within themselves. That's not allowing them to feel fully of themselves. So I think trust is very important, and having that understanding that you can make mistakes. You know, and I wrote down something real quick when you were talking about making mistakes. I wrote down that a mistake is just an action that didn't get the immediate result that you wanted. Sometimes mistakes are beautiful. Sometimes mistakes get you the result that you actually wanted. So that goes back to trust. If you trust the process, you trust that you're going where you are, you trust that you can handle not necessarily whatever comes up, but you can handle what comes up, you know? And that allows you, as you go through these processes, as you reinvent yourself in a new way, and you go to do something, because to me, reinvention means you're doing something that you haven't done before. And that's scary, right? That could be very challenging and very scary. It's the fear of the unknown is our biggest fear. And I think, you know, they say the two biggest fears, actually, public speaking is ahead of death. I think you mentioned this last week, Don, or last time we were together, where, you know, people would rather be in the box than talking about the person in the box. But that's both unknown. Speaking in front of a group, what could happen, what could go wrong? And then obviously the other unknown is we don't know what's on the other side. But that's the challenge. But when we have that trust and we know it's all going to work out, I think that's very much a huge key for us.
I think that is huge. And I think taking it into perspective, you know, a lot of times I talk to a lot of people who haven't had a lot of experience or are believing something based on how they grew up or who influenced them. And, there's always people say, if I only had the money, whatever it is. And I always find those people never had any money, because if they had a lot of money, they know that isn't the answer. There's more challenged people who have spent their life making money at the expense of relationships, at the expense of health, at the expense of so many things. There's a saying, it's better to be in the dark than go to the light and then go back to the dark, right? Because once you've seen it, once you felt it, you can't go back and be the same person. So sometimes reinvention happens by circumstance. And the other thing is everybody needs to accept that everybody can use help. A lot of people are proud. A lot of people say, I can do it myself. I experienced this morning with my AirPods. I thought I could pair them up. I did everything but Google it. And after Googling it in 30 seconds, I understood that they had to be in the holder. You had to press the button. You had to pair it. But I could have spent a whole day, and then I would have got angry at the AirPods. I would have got angry at the system.
Right.
Instead of saying, get some direction here, get some advice, and, get some from people you trust. And I think trust is a key thing. And solicit it in a positive way, by giving a context. I'm having a real difficulty here. I can't seem to put this thing together. I know you've got a lot of experience. I appreciate your advice, right? And then someone can be happy to help you. So Dave, I think that's one of the challenges for people who consider themselves strong, is they're an island unto themselves.
Yeah.
And how can you grow if it's all going to be in your mind and in kind of a vacuum? What's your thoughts?
Well, I take this back to the mental health journey that I've been through and that I've witnessed and helped others through of, asking for help is strength. You have to lean on somebody else, and you have to have trust, as Jason points out, that things will get better. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a solution, whether that be the AirPods, pairing, there's a solution. If there's depression, there's a solution. If there's anxiety, there's a solution. We can get through these things by trusting in something. And Jason, as you were talking, I really appreciated reinvention is scary. It's doing something new. And it reminded me of so last time I was on with Don, Jason, I channeled my inner Jason and I went and found a quote by the Dalai Lama. Well, this time I'll find a quote it says Bob Proctor, but your comment reinforced this is, faith and fear both demand you believe in something you cannot see. You choose. Okay. So we can have faith that something is going to come out positive, or we can fear the unknown. And reinvention, as we're trying to do something new, we have to have faith that positive will come out of it. Trust the process, the people that we're leaning on. I see this a lot with people I talk to about mental health, is they're afraid of what could go right, which is kind of counterintuitive, but you have to look at what can come out positive from it. Have faith that it doesn't have to be religious, just something of the unknown that is going to be positive instead of fearful. Too many of us are afraid to reinvent ourselves. We think that where we are today is what we should be 10 years from now. And I say that very particular. I'm thinking of a couple of cases of, I've mentioned before, I don't work with, but I talk to a lot of teenagers in my neighborhood and my family relationships. And a lot of them are too afraid to try something new. Oh, I can't wear that dress. I can't try that new sport. I can't ask that girl out. I can't. Because they're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of looking embarrassed. The speaking in front of a big crowd. What are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of looking stupid. I'm afraid of being embarrassed. Well, these things are temporary. I understand in a teenage mind, everything is, we've all been there. It's 10 times worse than it really will be. And yet we have to experience these things to know that we can get through them. And too many times I find people are afraid to try something new because of the fear of the outcome, that it's a permanent outcome every time they try something and they fail.
Yeah, I think that's excellent because, they say, and who knows who they are and how they figured it out, but 90% of everything you fear never comes true.
Yeah.
The 10% that does come true, you had no way of anticipating or planning for. So you're just really hoping and wishing to stop time, to stop events. And time is your friend, depending on how much time you have. If you don't have much time, whatever you're facing will come soon enough and you'll get over it somehow. Or it'll get over you somehow. It doesn't really matter, but you keep moving forward. And I think it's really what people think that worries people more than what they think. More people will be comfortable with their situation if they felt everybody else would be comfortable with it if they knew about it. But, if you're living a lie, how do you ever reinvent yourself properly? Right? If you put something that's not true to yourself in front of you, now you got one more image, one more perception you need to maintain. If you tell somebody you're doing great and you're making a boatload of money, whether you are or not, when you see them again, how are you doing now with that investment? How are you doing that? And even if you took a step back, oh, that's too bad. And I think that's the real obstacle, is the obstacle itself that you put in front of yourself. Why play in a game that you know is going to be tough to win? Why not set yourself up for winning? Why not have a low bar for happiness? One time I did an experiment, which just came to my head. I said, this week, how happy could I get? How soon? Could I get super happy by 10 o'clock if I worked at it? Instead of waiting till 6 and say, well, I didn't grab it all, didn't get my work accomplished. I mean, who are you your best friend or your worst enemy? And most people are down on themselves for whatever reason, and it doesn't feel right. But instead of making the change, they keep going at it the same way, expecting a different result. With that said, want to recognize Kelly. Everybody knows Kelly. If you haven't been on live streaming or LinkedIn long enough. Without Kelly, this show wouldn't be what it is, wouldn't even be possible in so many ways. Kelly also has her own show, The Awesome Journey, on Tuesdays. I always promote because I believe it's a quality show, with Christy Howard, and just a wonderful colleague and LinkedIn associate that I would recommend using this opportunity to get to know Kelly if you haven't. With that, Jason, I know you know Kelly, so moving back to reinvention, there's so many nuances and facets to it, and I think just like if you wanted to change your look, which is a lot easier than changing your mind or other parts of you, you would probably take with small steps, right? You wouldn't just go red hair and all kinds of stuff right out of the gate. You just decide maybe a different style of hair, whatever, and that's kind of cosmetic. But genuine reinvention comes from the ability to review, reflect, get advice, and I think, it's like A/B testing, right? Here's what I'm thinking. I'm about ready to do it. Is there something you see here I should take into consideration? Because once you launch, it's in the air. What's your thoughts, Jason?
I think that reflecting and getting help is great, but at the end of the day, it's us. And one of the biggest challenges with reinvention is just that. You hear it's become a joke on some of the TV shows, the comedy shows. They're like, "Oh, typical Jason." That's what Jason does, and we get so invested in, well, that's who I am. And if we want to be consistent, and we have a lot of our culture rewards being consistent, because if you're a jerk, but everyone knows you're a jerk, people say, well, but everyone knows you're a jerk, so it's okay. to an extent. But it's not okay to be a jerk. But it's that consistency of, well, you're staying the same. You're not really nice one day and then a jerk the next day and then a wild man the next day, so on and so forth. So that's one of the challenges about reinventing ourselves, is that we are invested in, but I can't do that. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. And we have to let that go. It's cognitive dissonance, where it's your thoughts, your actions, and your feelings all line up. And when one of those doesn't line up, we have an internal struggle. But if you do it all together, and you do it with a plan, and you do it organized, it goes a lot easier. Sometimes things come up. I was talking about mistakes. Sometimes things show up in your life and you just go down a different path anyway. I think that's what a lot of us do, is that something shows up, we react to it, we learn new things from it, we grow from it, and that takes us down a different path. Values change, or what we love changes, stuff like that. But why not control it? Why not take control of that and say, I want to do this, I want to do that? And like you said, you don't just jump off the cliff. You make sure you got that parachute, and then you take that leap. And it's nice to have people that support you and can tell you how to put the chute on and how to tighten it up and then to double check it for you. That's a wonderful thing, but eventually you have to make that leap.
Well, and I think experience builds momentum. Having a winning streak, right, is something everybody loves. And why not take the lowest hanging fruit to get your first win, right? Too many people overreach, and it's just too much. You see people go into the weight room that never lifted weight and they want to do 300 pounds. Well, that's great ambition, but the reality is either you're not going to accomplish it or you're going to get hurt by trying to accomplish it. So why not take an easy question and then build on that question? Because everything we're talking about, if reinvention is going to be sustainable, it has to be achievable, right? Where, you put one step in front of another. I know Dave has a great example of getting into running, right? Why don't you share how reinvention has helped you in that degree?
Yeah, I don't want to rehash the whole story, but at the beginning of the pandemic, I began a new mental health treatment for my mental stimulation of my brain with electrodes and a diet and both of them combined to provide me more energy. And I recognized that I wanted to get back into running, and running helped me when I felt low, when I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. I could go for a run and I'd feel better. And that translated into a happier feeling, a happier outlook, a better perspective. And then what I found is that's kind of infectious. I've had a number of folks come up to me of, hey, you've inspired me to lose weight. You inspired me to transition from biking to running, or from, not being a sloth, but just kind of laying around to being more active, So it's contagious in this process of how we can have an effect on other people. And it's transformed me in the sense that, I used to be a sit in front of the TV kind of guy when I get home from work just to decompress, but a good run puts me in a better mood, and that translates to a happier time with my family. I think that's answering your question. I was taking
I think it's a great answer, because it begs the question. Sometimes what you do for something in itself solves the issue. Yeah. Like they've done studies saying that exercise works better than antidepressants.
Yes, there's no doubt in my mind that it does. And I think I've shared on here before, and I did it, during the pandemic, I was doing a lot of research on health, diet, meditation, the effects on the body, the gut-brain connection. And there was one thing that, well, beyond that, even just cold versus heat, a combination of, ice bath and the sauna, vice versa. But one thing that really has always struck me is that they found a protein, they call it the hope molecule, I think kind of facetiously, but every time we contract a muscle, any muscle in our body, it releases a protein that goes to the brain that stimulates happiness. So why not do something that's going to make you happy? Move your muscles, walking, running. You don't have to go to a marathon level like I am. And even then I'm realizing, okay, maybe I'm more of a half marathon guy, but at the same time, I found what worked for me was running. It could just be a bike for somebody, elliptical, walking with your friends, walking by yourself. It's individual. Something we alluded to earlier was what's happiness for somebody else or what works for somebody else doesn't necessarily work for everybody. There is no rubber stamp, and trusting that a coach, a mentor, a friend will have our own perspectives in mind is very important.
Well, I think too, what comes up is attitude is essential. So if you can raise your positive attitude through nutrition, through exercise, through social relationships, you're in a better position to make those reinvention choices. Because reinvention shouldn't be running from something, but running to something, right? So most people are better at avoiding things than they are at attracting or acquiring things, right? If a tiger starts chasing you, you're going to see how fast you can really run, and you could imagine that, but it wouldn't be the same as the reality of it.
Right.
And I also agree with Dave. When I first started into exercise a long time ago, when I joined a gym, my first idea was, well, get the clothes, have the look, right? When you get there, hey, how much better can I be? How fast can I get there? How much more weight can I lift? How much faster can I run? And, after a few days of that, I said, I hate this. This isn't fun. This is actually a struggle. And until I got to myself and said, hey, just walk to the level you're comfortable with. Come back tomorrow, do a little bit more. Too many people want to eat an elephant in one bite, and they never get any nutrition that way. So, Jason, I guess everything is relative, everything has context, and I believe things should connect the dots, because if you're in just one silo and you achieve everything in that silo and neglect everything else around you, have you really achieved success or happiness?
That's a great point. And, just to go piggyback on what you were saying too. And I as we were talking, this hit me. We're having these different level conversations. We all know each other. We've talked a lot. We're talking at a kind of a high level on some stuff, but I want to back up, because if someone's just joining us or someone's not in a different place, reinvention, and unfortunately, I think I'm frozen here.
No, you're still good.
But I'll just keep talking and we'll figure it out. Okay, good. Reinvention could be a tiny step. It's that first chip of marble. It's that, it could be like, I have an issue with soda. I've worked on it again this year. It got out of control, and then I brought it back. But it's, I have a soda a day. Well, maybe I don't have a soda a day. Maybe that's how I reinvent myself. And that one simple action is going to make me lose weight. It's going to make me feel better. It's going to give me more energy than that false energy that sugar and caffeine was giving me. So reinvention doesn't have to be changing your complete life, getting a new job, moving to Bali or Costa Rica, and building a bridge. It's just that one step where you can reinvent yourself every day. So I just want to put that out there, that's something that's so important to realize, that it's not it can be daunting, but it doesn't have to be. Just take that one step. Just, you can, you turn the boat by 1 degree, and it's by 1 degree and 1 degree, and you're going to get to where you want to go. So I want to just kind of free everyone of that we don't think that reinvention is this huge thing that we have to change everything about our life and the people in our life and all that. No, you can reinvent yourself every day in small ways that will lead you to your purpose.
I'm gonna channel my inner Jason one more time and go back to Martin Luther King quote. of, faith is taking that first step when you can't see the whole staircase.
Right.
That's a good one.
Just go up one step and just get a little bit better. And whether you reach the top or not, you're still improving one step at a time. And reinvention, like Jason's saying, is not a dramatic 180 out, or as one skipper I've heard said when the North Vietnamese were coming out to a ship, he says, "Let's do a 360 and get the heck out of here." No, I need, it's incremental, like Jason's saying, 1 degree at a time, one step at a time. If you make dramatic shifts, you will find yourself unhappy because you won't see a transition over time. It'll be like, oh, well, that worked for the day. Like you were saying earlier, Don, today I'm happy, but tomorrow I'm not. Well, if you see it over time, like the weight loss programs, everybody wants that immediate. They want to be 50 pounds lighter. Well, are you happy at the end of that? No, because then you start eating again. But if you come down slowly, you see the transition over time. It just becomes normal. It's not a dramatic snap of the finger. Here we are.
Well, I think, what we're also dealing with is semantics, right? If we look at words, if we say reinvention, and then instead of that, we say readjustment, right? Someone could say, yeah, I can adjust something because I haven't really, I can adjust the temperature, the furnace. I don't have to buy a brand new one, right? And once you can get comfortable and allow yourself that benefit, and the journey is where you pick up the information, not the goal. You start to understand little elements that are important to your next adjustment, let's say. And I think that's so important. And why, it's almost like you can finish a book by just reading the last page, right? And you can say, I'm finished with this book, but what happened between the first page and the last page? And what was the benefit? So many people are goal-oriented that their whole mission is achieving goals, but not living with those goals anymore. I'm going to be this, once I'm this, I'm going to be more of this or whatever. But when do you get human? When do you put down the competition? And the other element is when you can go from being a leading actor to a supporting actor, where your goal is not to be any better than you are. At a certain point, you just have to, it'd be beneficial to say, I'm really comfortable with who I am. Whatever people think, whatever I'm not, it doesn't matter. The only person you have control over is yourself. And why not be happy with yourself? How many times you're working with other people who have so many challenges, but they're perfectly happy? And you've gotten to the point where you say, oh, I'm accomplished and I'm this, but I'm miserable. So the proof is in the pudding. It's really saying at the end of the day, when you put your head on your pillow, am I proud of myself today for what I did or didn't do? Am I fortunate to look forward to tomorrow to keep working at it? If everybody understands, everybody's a work in progress. And everybody knows the final outcome is you leave. There is nothing you can do to buy another 10 years if you're successful. It's not like a pinball machine, right? Where you get enough points and all of a sudden you get some free games. So, I think the hardest thing, Jason, is for people to have context. And a lot of times I believe they're playing to an unfriendly audience that no matter what they do is always going to, some people growing up, I know no matter what I did was never good enough. It didn't matter. B+, why didn't you get an A? You're all this and you got that.
Right.
Well, what is that person reflecting to you? Well, you're not all that, or they wouldn't be telling you that. They'd be telling you, hey, that was great. What can you do to do better? And if I think people getting reassurance. I know that there's, I'm fortunate with my wife. She is always the best during the worst. That's what you need, is somebody say, don't let it get you down. You're better than this. Or, hey, I believe in you. We'll get through this. And at that point you feel much better than, hey, how dumb can you be? Or something like that. And you start to defend it, but it's still sinking in. You're right, I'm pretty dumb. But I'm going to carry that dumbness with me into the next thing. And what was that all about? Jason, what's your thoughts?
I'll just say this real quick, that something that also I think about is within this context of this conversation is that you don't have to reinvent yourself. You don't have to reinvent, readjust everything. I work with clients and I always say, if it's working for you, we don't need to change it. If it's okay, if that part of your life is great, let's move on. Let's go to something else. So we're not saying, I will speak for the group here, we're not saying that you have to reinvent yourself all the time and always change everything. If there's parts that are working for you, or if your life is great, if you're the Buddha on the mount, bless you. That's amazing. Take that win. Take it. Of course, we could all tweak things. We could all adjust, to your point, Don. We could all that. There are parts of our lives that we're going to reinvent because the world changes. Our internal has to reflect the external at the same time. But so there are things that, if you stay the same, you keep waiting for the Pony Express to come and bring your mail, it's not going to show up. So the world does change, and we have to change with it to an extent. But I also want to put that out there too, that you don't, it's not like, well, that's the right thing to do, is to reinvent yourself. If it's working, stick with it.
Absolutely. Dave, what's your thoughts?
I think Jason makes an excellent point, and whether we're reinventing ourselves. I mean, you said semantics earlier, readjusting. It's kind of striking some chords here with me, that when we're not happy, we have to identify those things that are making us unhappy, or that we're not happy with, I should say. They're not making us unhappy. We're choosing to not be happy. So we may have to transition our perspective on what makes us happy, the environment that we're in. So maybe, I'm thinking about this in the perspective of, what have I done since transitioning from the military? I've had to reinvent my persona just a little bit. Going from a military structured environment to, I now work for myself, and because I wasn't happy with an 8-hour day, doing something for somebody else all day long just to say I punched a clock, I did reinvent myself a little bit. I'm now in the more business side of life, that I was reactive. Now I'm proactive, or I have to be more proactive than I am, probably. That's one of the reasons I appreciate our relationships in the collaboration group that we're a part of, Don set up. But it's really, I'm struggling with how to readjust to what you said, Jason, because it's very impactful. It's really changing my thought here.
Well, I think, what that brings to mind is when people say, I don't care, right? And usually that's from someone who should care, and someone who should be making at least steps towards making a change. But then you take that later on in someone's life and they say, I don't care. And it's based because they had it already. They don't need it, right? What you're interested in when you're 20, when I was growing up, was a muscle car, right? If you could get a car that made a lot of noise and moved fast, you'd probably pick up some more girls. But, it gave you control over something that was significant. Now, if someone says, here's a muscle car, I'd run from it. Right? Because it doesn't fit me anymore. I don't fit it anymore. And you got to know when your time is up. When someone taps you on the shoulder and say, I'm cutting in, you got to understand that's part of maturing. There's a time to hold them and there's a time to fold them, according to Kenny Rogers. And how many times you see someone avoiding age? right? And all of a sudden they're doing all these weird, in my opinion, adjustments that is all going to be superficial. It's how do you reinvent yourself inside? How do you readjust your attitude? How fast do you get over a loss? You know, they say it's not how many times you fall, it's how fast you get up. Because you're going to fall on your own, you're going to get pushed down, you're going to get run over. But how many times do you pick yourself up, dust yourself off? And you know, at least one could say, no matter how horrific things might have been in such situation, you survived it. No matter how bad the storm is, it passed. It's over, and you're still here.
I would only add to that, Don, because you've said how fast you get up several times in our several weeks of conversations, and I would only add to that how fast you get up and learn from your fall. Because if you're getting up and just doing the same thing, it's the Einstein, is the I forgot the exact quote, but doing something over and over without learning from it essentially is not very bright. So I can fall down 1,000 times, get up 1,001, but if I've learned nothing, then I'm not reinventing myself. I'm not learning from the process to get better.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I think that's really the key is a loss is a loss, and there's no other way sometimes to define it differently. You lose a loved one, that's just a significant loss. Again, you can use different tools and mechanisms, but I always use, would they want me to be feeling this way right now if they were here? Right? So if you lost a dear one, they would want you to be the best you could be, get back in the game, don't worry about them. Kind of like in a relay race. You're given the baton to run your lap, but your goal is to make sure that baton gets passed to the new person as fast as possible, right? You don't look back, you don't restrict that movement, but everything goes towards something. And really, what's your trend? What's your momentum is key. Jason?
Yeah, I wasn't ringing the bell to join the conversation, but yes, thank you for passing it on.
Sorry, my phone got a message. I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad it wasn't. The only time a technical issue bothers me is if it's mine, right? So once a bell rings, everybody thinks, is it my AirPods? Is it the whatever?
That was me. I apologize.
You're fine.
No worries. I just thought it was funny. I used to, when I was a trainer, I used to use a bell similar to that to bring them back into class, and people would be like, "Oh, it reminds me of meditation." I'm like, "That's whatever it does, whatever brings us back," and that's kind of the point, right? We're getting close here to the hour, and it's been a interesting conversation. It's just it could be a very deep one. It's a wonderful topic, and not to be all art all the time, but I'll say this. Reinvention is coming back to yourself. That's what I believe. It's like coming back to your true self, your true core. And I've gone through that with my business, where I started my business based on, and I'll just be very blunt. So my company name is One Path Coaching. I'm not a coach. I've done coaching for decades, and I can do it really well, but that's not my purpose. My purpose is in healing and helping people grow and have positive mental health. I chose that name based on market, my limiting beliefs and things of that nature. And so as I reinvent myself as my company, One Path Healing, that's truly just bringing me back to who I am. So I want to say that first. And then using art as that. In the early 2000s, I was blessed. I live in San Francisco, California, and I knew a lot of emerging artists at the time. And I was kind of involved in that world, and I saw a lot of amazing artists and was able to pick up some great pieces, and not for the tens of thousands of dollars they charge now. But I mentioned that because I would watch them paint live. Back in the early 2000s, that was kind of the DJ era, and they would do live paintings. And I would watch someone do a live painting, and it would get to a point where I was like, "Oh my goodness, that's amazing!" And then they would take a big glob of paint and stick it on it and put it over it, and keep going. And I would watch that painting transition, and I would be like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" But they knew they had their vision. And as they went, and it almost reinvented, to use the word, the painting in a new direction, and it looked even better. But I couldn't see it, but they saw it. And that's the key, I think, as we go through this process, is to just have that goal in mind and do what you have to do to get there.
That's perfect. So, this whole discussion is about understanding as much as doing, right? Appreciating, and I think the big question everybody should ask, and even ask somebody else, is why? I want to lose 30 pounds. Well, that's wonderful, but why? Why are you going on this journey? Because they say if your why's big enough, you'll always figure the how to.
Yeah.
Right? Like I said with the tiger, you don't think twice if you're getting chased that, hey, if this is life or death, I better give it everything I got. And I think some people on the other extreme, and I think that's where balance comes in, worry too much about something there was nothing to worry about. So some people don't take things seriously enough. Some other people take things too seriously enough. And I think the element of adequate has to come in. When did I reach an adequate level at this point? And it's hard because whoever you're with is going to be different than who you are. They're going to have pluses and minuses over you. I'm always reminded of my wife, who's just much better at so many more things than I am. And when she compares me to what the standard is, let's say, I have to come back and say that's one of the downsides of being so wonderful. You're going to have to put up with people who are just average and be more patient and tolerant to those people. So, you have to realize that to be accepted, to be welcomed, to be respected, to be appreciated, those are the attributes that people are hoping for. It's not saying I got $1 million in the bank. What do you think?
Right.
I don't know nothing about it. I don't know how you got it. I don't know what you do with it, But there was one gentleman I met real early on that says to be rich, all you need is $1 more than you could spend. Right? Because if you knew you had everything and $1, that's what else? What's $10 or what's 10 million going to do for you?
Right.
And I think it's the same thing with being comfortable and satisfied with what you have. So many people, if you really want to get grounded, go to a hospital any day, right? Walk through those wards, and some people are just lucky to be breathing, and you worry that, hey, the car I have isn't as new as that car. I mean, at that point, that's a way to do some self-reflection. That's a way for a buddy to come in and say, 99% of the people would do anything to have what you have. And you're still not happy. So why would that 1% of what you're not having going to make the difference? And I think that's where people have to realize that every one of us has a neutral and a reverse gear. It's not drive all the time. Sometimes you got to put a neutral and just figure things out. And sometimes you got to back out of something to really get on the right course. So, Jason, what's your thoughts now on reinvention, since we've kind of covered this in so many different ways?
I think that, just to go back to my point from earlier, it's like it doesn't have to be huge. It's that one thing, go out after we get off this call, whoever's watching, or if you watch it later, when you finish it, or when you get up in the morning, change one thing. One thing, look at an area in your life that may not be the greatest. And if they're all great, that's awesome. I love that. But if you can see one area where, that could be a little bit better, change one thing and make a decision and say, let's try this and let's see where this takes me. And let's see if that gets me there.
That's excellent advice. And I would take that if I was taking that to heart. And I think to all our points, little things done right compound. Like I learned about apple cider vinegar. I learned about olive oil. And you can add these things to your little menu every day and really see what it feels like, what it does for you. And the biggest gratification one gets is achieving something no one even thought was available, let alone possible to you. because you like diet. Nothing's going to happen if you eat a greasy hamburger or you eat a fresh apple the day you eat it. And they actually had what they called a K curve, is everybody starts with a straight vertical line, and you start eating junk food and I start eating healthy food, and all of a sudden the line starts going up in my case and going down in your case, and we meet 20 years later, and the impact of those little things done right over time start to show up.
Right.
And if you really want to enjoy life, the best way to do is have a bigger longevity to life, because that's where the investments start to pay off. Well, if you do this today, 20 years from now, you won't be in the situation. And someone said something that struck me is, are you trading in your tomorrows for little bits of pleasure today?
Right.
Right? And there was one other person who told me the biggest nightmare they have is they're in their deathbed and all their family and friends are around them. And they say to themselves, what could I have done not to be here right now? And they look back and they say, well, it was whatever. Regrets don't help you, but they are educational steps. And I think, and to kind of conclude on my end, it's really, what can you do, right? Not what you can't do or what you used to do. Because that's where people say, well, I used to be able to do this, I can't. Well, what can you do now? You can paint, you can listen to music, right? You can do so many things. Don't put yourself in a box and put the top on it. Dave, what's your thoughts now that we're coming at the end?
My first thoughts are on the under can't is, I think too many of us over the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, I say that every 20 or 30 years we go through a high in our nation and our society, I should say, global society, of very high positive points, and then down to boredom, negative spots where everything is the can't. I can't. And right now, I think the nation in particular is in a, well, we can't. There's no way to get out of these things. We look for the negatives. The pandemic didn't help. Well, a lot of people looked at the negatives, but if we can shift our perspective, shift our narrative to, what can I change one little thing today, like Jason said? What can I do to bring my happiness? And it starts with setting goals. To your point, what's my why? Simon Sinek, let's start with why. Having a meaning, having a purpose. And then having good communication with people will help us find what it is that's going to bring us the happiness that we can do. What can we do to bring happiness to ourselves, connect and bring happiness to others? And I think that as we get into this downward spin of life right now, and this doldrum can't life, it's really bringing us all down. And we think that we have to put forward a positive spin on everything we do. And I'm going to social media. And then, like I said earlier, comparison is the greatest thief of joy. Well, they're happy and they're going on trips, they're having parties, they're doing all these fun things, and yet I don't know what they're doing in the background. They could be the most miserable turd on earth. So invention of our, reinvention, happiness, it's an internal structure that we have. What is it we are going to find to bring happiness to ourselves? Make that transition, make that that shift daily, that little degree steps, and then we'll find your happiness. And if we can all do that individually and together, we'll find a better place in our lives.
Yeah, and I think it's only going to get more challenging as AI starts to become more impactful. The hardest thing is to know, am I on a level playing field? Most people are like, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Right? And you don't know truth anymore because it's been so manipulated in so many ways, and it's gotten so tribal in so many ways that you're in or you're out. There is no middle ground. There is no all of us. It's going to be who is going to win. And I think that's only creating more discourse, more disenfranchisement, and less belief in anything. And I say if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I think that's what's starting to happen is, and it's hard because you're always having too many choices. I know we're at the end, but I remember growing up, there were only 3 news channels. And they came on at the same time every night. And except for the personalities, it was the exact same news because they reported what cameras saw, what people saw, not what people made up, not what people, and there's that shortcutting, that cheating. We don't have to go through the process. We'll just take it. And then, I mean, there's a zillion things. And that's where I think the positive angle is how resolute can you be in your own beliefs that you feel comfortable with and feel they have value beyond yourself. And I think that's where I think everybody needs to hope to move from is from selfish to selfless, where I'm part of something bigger than myself. I'm contributing to other people's happiness and positiveness. And I think that's where, people would rather see a murder scene on TV than see someone's kid's birthday, right? There's millions of wonderful events, births every day, weddings, you name it. They don't get the attention. Why? They're not that exciting. Go to a movie today and the special effects will blow you out of your seat. Look at a movie 50 years ago and it was one scene with a few people. So with that said, I want to thank the audience. I want to thank Jason and Dave again. And hopefully you come back tomorrow. We've got Kelly on her every Thursday that's been doing it for 18 months together. Got to give her credit. And with that said, go out and make an adjustment that's comfortable for you. Reinvention will come from a multitude of small adjustments, and it'll give you focus and hopefully give you happiness. And that's what we're all shooting for. So with that said, take care, Dave. Take care.